The moment Jake Sullivan placed his weathered hands over Eliza Montgomery's small, trembling fingers on the piano keys, something extraordinary happened. The 12-year-old girl who doctors said would never play music again produced a sound so pure, so perfect, that her mother Victoria collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't just that Eliza was playing, it was that for the first time since the accident, her eyes sparkled with something that had been missing for years: hope. If this story of unexpected connection and healing touches your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more inspiring true stories that remind us of the power of human compassion. 3 months earlier, Jake Sullivan had been nothing more than a struggling piano teacher and single father, barely making ends meet in a small apartment across town from the Montgomery estate. He never imagined his life would intersect with one of the wealthiest families in the country, or that his simple gift for teaching would change multiple lives forever. Victoria Montgomery stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below. Despite the breathtaking view and the luxurious surroundings, she felt hollow. Her daughter's birthday party had ended hours ago, yet Victoria couldn't bring herself to leave the spot where she'd watched Eliza sit alone while other children played. The accident 2 years ago had taken more than Eliza's mobility, it had stolen her spirit. "Mrs. Montgomery?" Her assistant's voice interrupted her thoughts. The school called again. Eliza refused to participate in music class today. Victoria closed her eyes. Music had once been Eliza's greatest joy. Before the accident, her daughter had been a prodigy, playing complex pieces that moved audiences to tears. Now, she refused to even touch a piano. "Thank you, Claire," Victoria said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "Please tell Richard I'll be taking Eliza to her therapy appointment tomorrow myself." Richard Montgomery, Eliza's father and Victoria's ex-husband, had built a technology empire worth billions. Their divorce had been amicable on paper but devastating in reality. Richard had thrown himself into his work after the accident, as if he could code away the pain of seeing his daughter suffer. His absence was yet another loss for Eliza to bear. The next morning, Victoria gently helped Eliza into the car for her weekly physical therapy session. The girl's face remained expressionless, her once vibrant eyes dull as she stared out the window. "Dr. Patel mentioned trying something new today," Victoria said, attempting to spark interest. "Something about music therapy." Eliza's shoulders tensed. "I don't want to." Victoria gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Sweetheart, I know it's hard." "You don't know anything," Eliza whispered, the words cutting deeper than if she'd shouted them. "Nobody does." The therapy center was housed in a modern building with warm lighting and encouraging posters on the walls. Dr. Patel greeted them with her usual calm smile, but today she wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, tall with kind eyes and prematurely gray hair at his temples despite appearing to be in his mid-30s. "Mrs. Montgomery, Eliza, this is Jake Sullivan. He's going to be working with us on a new approach to Eliza's therapy." Jake stepped forward, offering his hand first to Victoria, then crouching down to Eliza's eye level in her wheelchair. "It's nice to meet you, Eliza. I hear you used to play piano." Eliza looked away. "Used to." Instead of the pitying look Victoria had come to expect from people, Jake simply nodded. "I used to play professional baseball. Now I teach piano. Things change, but music doesn't. It's always there waiting for us." For the briefest moment, Victoria saw a flicker of curiosity in her daughter's eyes. Jake Sullivan had never intended to become a piano teacher. His dreams had centered around baseball diamonds and major league contracts until a car accident shattered his knee and his career prospects in one terrible night. The same accident had taken his wife, leaving him alone to raise their son, Max. Music had been his salvation. During his recovery, he'd returned to the piano his mother had insisted he learn as a child. What began as therapy became passion, then profession. Now he taught students from his modest apartment, charging fees that barely covered the rent but finding fulfillment in the progress of his students. Dr. Patel had approached him after hearing him play at a local cafe. "I have a patient who needs something beyond traditional therapy," she'd explained. "A child who's lost her connection to music after trauma. Would you consider working with her?" Jake had hesitated. "I'm not a therapist." "No," Dr. Patel had agreed. "You're something more valuable in this case, someone who understands what it means to lose something fundamental to your identity and find a new way forward." Now, sitting beside Eliza in the therapy room, Jake made no move toward the keyboard in the corner. Instead, he pulled out his phone. "My son Max is about your age," he said casually, showing her a picture of a smiling boy with his father's eyes. "He hates practicing scales but loves improvising. Do you have a favorite song?" Eliza remained silent, but her eyes darted to the phone. "Max and I have this game," Jake continued, undeterred by her silence. "We take turns playing one note at a time, building a melody together. No pressure, no right or wrong notes. Just conversation through music." Victoria watched from the corner, heart in her throat, as Jake placed his phone on the table between them, revealing a simple piano app. He tapped one key, producing a clear, bright note that hung in the air. Then he waited. The silence stretched until Victoria was certain Eliza would refuse. Then, slowly, her daughter lifted one finger and pressed a key on the screen. The note blended with the lingering memory of Jake's, creating the beginning of a harmony. Jake smiled, not with triumph but with simple acknowledgement, and played another note. Back and forth they went, building a simple, halting melody that grew more confident with each exchange. By the end of the session, Eliza had played more notes than words she'd spoken in weeks. "Same time next week?" Jake asked as they prepared to leave. For the first time in months, Eliza nodded without being prompted. In the car, Victoria's hands trembled on the steering wheel. "You seem to enjoy that, sweetheart." Eliza looked out the window. "He doesn't look at me like I'm broken." Victoria blinked back tears. "Would you like to continue with Mr. Sullivan?" Another nod, small but certain. That evening, Victoria made a call to Dr. Patel. "I'd like to arrange private sessions with Mr. Sullivan, in addition to our regular therapy. Whatever his rate is." "Mrs. Montgomery," Dr. Patel interrupted gently, "Mr. Sullivan isn't doing this for money. He's doing it because he believes in the healing power of music. But I should warn you, his circumstances are quite different from yours." Victoria frowned. "What do you mean?" "Jake is a single father working multiple jobs to support his son. He teaches piano from his apartment because he can't afford to rent a studio space. He's extraordinarily talented, but his life has not been easy." After hanging up, Victoria sat in her home office, surrounded by expensive art and designer furniture that suddenly seemed meaningless. Her daughter had shown more interest in life during 1 hour with Jake Sullivan than she had in months of expensive treatments and specialists. The following week, Victoria drove Eliza to a modest apartment building in a working-class neighborhood. Eliza's eyes widened as they entered the small living room that doubled as Jake's studio. A well-loved upright piano stood against one wall, surrounded by stacks of music books and children's drawings. "Sorry about the mess," Jake said, quickly gathering toys from the couch. "Max is with his grandmother today, but he left his usual trail behind." Victoria noticed the worn furniture, the carefully mended curtains, the way Jake's shirt had been precisely ironed despite a small stain that wouldn't come out. This man lived with such different constraints than her family, yet there was a warmth in this space that her penthouse lacked. "It's perfect," she said sincerely. Jake guided Eliza to the piano, placing a cushion on the bench to help her reach the keys comfortably. "Today, we're going to try something real. No apps, no games. Just you and the piano having a conversation." Eliza's face tightened with anxiety. "I can't. My hands don't work right anymore." Jake considered this. "Different doesn't mean wrong. Let's find out what your hands can do now, instead of focusing on what they used to do." He placed his hands over hers, guiding her fingers to the keys. Feel the music before you try to play it. Let it exist in your mind first. Victoria watched as her daughter closed her eyes, allowing Jake to move her hands across the keys without pressing down. They created a silent dance across the ivory, a pantomime of music that gradually became more confident. Now, Jake said softly, let's make it real. Just one note at a time. With Jake's hand still lightly supporting hers, Eliza pressed a key. The note rang clear and true. Then another. And another. Tears streamed down Victoria's face as she watched her daughter play a simple melody, halting and imperfect but undeniably music. When they finished, Eliza was breathing hard, as if she'd run a race. I did it, she whispered, looking up at Jake with wonder. You did, he confirmed. And next time, you'll do even more. As they were leaving, Victoria noticed a calendar on Jake's refrigerator with several dates circled in red. One upcoming date had Max's tuition due written in bold letters with multiple exclamation points. Mr. Sullivan, she said impulsively, I'd like to arrange for regular sessions, 3 times a week if possible. And I insist on paying you properly for your time. Jake's expression grew careful. Mrs. Montgomery, I appreciate the offer, but... Please, Victoria said. What you're doing for Eliza is beyond value to me. Let me compensate you fairly. Something in her tone must have conveyed her sincerity, because Jake nodded slowly. All right. But the sessions need to remain focused on Eliza's needs, not on meeting some expectation of progress. Of course, Victoria agreed, relief washing through her. She named a figure that made Jake's eyes widen slightly, but he didn't argue further. Over the next few weeks, Eliza's progress was remarkable. Not just in her ability to play simple pieces on the piano, but in her overall demeanor. She began talking more, asking questions, even laughing occasionally at Jake's terrible music puns. Victoria found herself looking forward to their sessions as much as Eliza did, though she tried to maintain a professional distance. One afternoon, they arrived to find Jake looking stressed, speaking urgently on the phone while pacing the small living room. I understand, but there must be some kind of extension possible, he was saying. The scholarship covers most of it, but I just need another week for the remaining balance. He quickly ended the call when he noticed them. Sorry about that. Let's get started, shall we? But Eliza had already wheeled herself to the piano. Is Max okay? She asked, surprising Victoria with her directness. Jake's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He's fine. Just some administrative issues with his school. Victoria remained quiet during the lesson, but as they were preparing to leave, she cleared her throat. Mr. Sullivan, forgive me for overstepping, but is there something I could help with? Regarding Max's school? Jake's expression closed immediately. That's very kind, Mrs. Montgomery, but we're managing fine. Of course, Victoria said quickly, recognizing his pride. I just thought, perhaps, since you're helping Eliza so much. Mom, Eliza interrupted, can Max come to my birthday party next month? Both adults looked at her in surprise. Eliza hadn't shown interest in celebrating her birthday since the accident. If that would be all right with Mr. Sullivan, Victoria said carefully. Jake's expression softened. I'm sure Max would love that. He's heard a lot about you. On the drive home, Eliza was unusually talkative. Mr. Sullivan has a picture of Max playing baseball on his bookshelf. And there are trophies in his bedroom, I saw them when I went to the bathroom. Victoria glanced at her daughter. You're very observant. He was supposed to be famous, Eliza continued. I looked him up online. Jake Sullivan was going to play for the major leagues before his accident. Just like I was going to play at Carnegie Hall before mine. Victoria gripped the steering wheel tighter. Sweetheart. But he found something else, Eliza said, her voice stronger than Victoria had heard in years. He found a different way to love music. Maybe I can too. That night, Victoria did her own research. Jake Sullivan had indeed been a rising star in baseball, with scouts from major teams tracking his career. Articles from 8 years ago detailed the tragic accident that killed his wife and ended his athletic prospects. There was little information after that, just a few mentions of benefit concerts where he had performed to raise money for youth music programs. Victoria sat back, thinking about the worn furniture in Jake's apartment, the careful way he stretched his grocery budget, the tuition payment he was struggling to make. All while he poured his heart and talent into helping her daughter find her way back to music. The next day, Victoria called Richard. "I need to talk to you about Eliza," she said when her ex-husband answered. Richard's voice immediately tensed. "Is she all right? Did something happen?" "Something is happening," Victoria corrected. "She's improving. Significantly. And I need your help to make sure it continues." She explained about Jake Sullivan, the piano lessons, and the transformation they were witnessing in their daughter. "A piano teacher?" Richard sounded skeptical. "We've had the best specialists in the country working with her. And none of them reached her like he has," Victoria insisted. "Richard, she's playing again. Not like before, but she's making music. And she's talking about her birthday party." There was a long silence. "What do you need from me?" "I want to create a music scholarship program through your foundation," Victoria said. "Something that would provide instruments and lessons to children who can't afford them. And I want to offer Jake Sullivan a position as the program director." "You want to hire this man?" Richard's voice held a note of suspicion. "Victoria, are you sure this is about Eliza?" Victoria felt a flush of anger. "This is entirely about Eliza. And about a good man who's struggling to provide for his son while helping our daughter find her way back to herself. A man who understands her pain in ways we never could." After another long pause, Richard sighed. "Send me the details. I'll have my team look into setting something up." 2 days later, Victoria arrived at Jake's apartment with Eliza and a carefully prepared proposal. As Eliza practiced the simple piece they'd been working on, Victoria explained the scholarship program to Jake. The foundation would provide instruments, lessons, and performance opportunities to children from low-income backgrounds, she said. "We need someone who understands both music and overcoming obstacles to run it. Someone like you." Jake stared at the proposal, his expression unreadable. "This is substantial. It comes with a full-time salary, benefits, and a housing allowance," Victoria continued. "And of course, continued private lessons for Eliza would be part of your responsibilities." Jake set the papers down. "Mrs. Montgomery." "Victoria, please." "Victoria," he amended, "this is incredibly generous, but I have to ask, why? Why go to all this trouble for someone you barely know?" Victoria glanced at Eliza, who was still focused on the piano, her small fingers moving with growing confidence across the keys. "Because you gave my daughter back her music," she said simply. "And in doing so, you gave her back her future. I want you to be able to do that for other children, including your own son." Jake looked at Eliza, then back at Victoria. "I need to think about it. This would be a big change for Max and me." "Of course," Victoria said. "Take all the time you need." As they were leaving, Eliza suddenly turned her wheelchair around. "Mr. Sullivan? Will you still be my teacher even if you say no to Mom's offer?" Jake crouched down to her level. "Eliza, I will be your teacher for as long as you want to learn, no matter what else happens. That's a promise." The smile that bloomed on Eliza's face was worth more than all the billions in Richard's accounts. A week later, Jake called Victoria. "I've thought about your offer," he said. "I'd like to accept, with one condition." "Name it," Victoria said immediately. "I want to maintain my independence. If I'm going to run this program, I need to do it my way, based on what I know works, not just what looks good on paper." Victoria smiled. That's exactly why we want you, Jake. Your way works. The Montgomery Sullivan Music Foundation launched 3 months later, with a gala event that featured performances from children who had already benefited from